What's going on, you guys? Welcome back to the Neighborhood Podcast. One of the hosts of the podcast. My name is Kyle Dabra.
What's going on, everybody? Kevin Valentin here. Kyle, we back yet again, man. We keep taking these little breaks here and again, but it does feel good every now and again.
Yeah, and basically we're kind of like rocking like the same shirt. We rock these blues, baby. Rock these
We,
blues.
we do what we do what we can.
It's not the same shirt because mine does have like a black logo on it. Yours has a white one, but
Oh, this one.
overall, overall it's pretty close. So
Hey, it's uniform, bro. We working right now.
yeah, exactly. Maybe one day we'll be dressing up in a suit one day, but honestly, I don't. Those boys over on First Take and Undisputed, they can do that, but
Yeah, let them worry about the corporate stuff.
yeah. Though some of them do be swagging out though with those suits.
Hey, Shannon Sharp be looking kind of flea. I'm not gonna front.
Yeah. He gets kind of wacky with the colors though. He
I
gets
love
he
that
gets
though.
out there. He and I know we're not talking about the UFC this weekend, but Bruce Buffer, he's the guy that will kind of announce the fighters before the fight starts.
Mm-hmm.
Bro, you gotta see some of his fits. They're out there, bro.
Bro, I do not mind a fashion sense. I really don't. I think it's dope.
Yeah, so I just don't want to rock. I feel like if I'm rocking like that, like big of a suit, like where I'm like wearing like $50,000-$60,000 suit, that's too much attention, dude. I don't know if I'm built like that, like where I can handle that much
Hey,
attention.
if we on national TV, right? If we like get a segment on a show on an ESPN, whatever, right? I'm gonna make sure the world knows, like, bro, it's not about the money. I like looking good, and I like myself in different colors personally. But
Yeah,
I got that shoe collection to back that up, so it just kind of goes back and forth.
you know what I'd do? I'd just be so casual, bro. I'd rock a t-shirt.
Okay.
I just do that, bro. You could rock a Yankees hat. You could rep the Bronx if you wanted to. You do something like that.
Hey man, I always wear that hat when I can.
Isn't the new Yankees Twitter
Rep the
handle?
BX.
Eh, it's
I
whatever.
don't mind it. I like it. I think that kind of
Yeah,
fire.
yeah, because it's your hometown or whatnot.
Exactly. I think that's dope.
But I mean, we could talk about the Yankees all night. But
Yeah.
we got some topics to dive into. So you ready?
Yes, sir.
All right, so we get to talk about the Lakers a little bit and the epic collapse of a season that they had. They will miss the playoffs this year. They're currently sitting at like a 31-48 record. Might even be 31-49 after tonight. So we'll dive into that a little bit. We'll talk about who we think is going to win the NBA MVP since the regular season is coming to an end. After that, we'll kick it over to the NFL a little bit. We'll talk about who's really been the biggest winner of free agency so far. We'll also talk about DK Metcalf's future with the Seattle Seahawks. That actually tends to be up in the air right now, which is kind of surprising, but it kind of indicates that Seattle's in full rebuild mode. And then we'll kick it over to the MLB. The MLB season has started, and we'll talk about who we think is the favorite to win the World Series when it's all said and done by the end of the year. So with that said, let's not waste any more time. Kevin, got to talk about my team here. So floor is yours for the setup.
So the Los Angeles Lakers have been eliminated from playoff contention with their recent loss this past week or earlier in the week. LeBron James, Anthony Davis were riddled with injuries all year. The acquisition of Russell Westbrook did not pan out the way that originally had been anticipated. So, Kyle, I just got to ask, man, as painful as it is, what is going to happen with the Los Angeles Lakers in this offseason? And how do you feel about this the season going the way that it did?
Well, as far as this season goes, this season was an abject failure from the Lakers' perspective in any way, shape, or form. And I know some of the players, like Anthony Davis, have stated like this year in particular, they were just riddled with injuries, which is true to a certain extent. But it kind of goes without saying that this roster was constructed to go out and win a title. And it was just an abject failure from beginning to end. And this is something that Kevin and I had talked about even before the season had started. We talked about that the Lakers on paper, they looked amazing going into this year. It's just when you look at the roster that they had with guys like Westbrook, Carmelo Anthony, Dwight Howard, LeBron James, Anthony Davis, this is a great squad to roll with. If this was like 2012, Anthony Davis wasn't in the NBA yet, but you take those core guys like Carmelo, Russell, and LeBron. I mean, that's a God squad back in 2012, but it's 2022, and most of these guys, well, let's just face it, LeBron James is probably the only one who's actually still like playing at a consistent level. Carmelo Anthony and Russell Westbrook are pretty much cooked at this point. You could pretty much say the same thing for Dwight Howard. They're just at the end of their respective careers. And it didn't work out in any way, shape, or form. And then when you look at the rest of the roster when it comes to the role players just didn't step up. I mean, you had some guys that had flash moments. Talon had some flash moments earlier in the season, but he wasn't consistent throughout the year. Austin Reeves really didn't start stepping up until probably the second half of the season. Like I mentioned, Dwight Howard had sporadic moments here and there, but nothing consistent. DeAndre Jordan was on this team early on to begin with, but he ended up getting traded. He kind of had a minimal role at best with the Lakers. Trevor Ariza is basically just someone filling a roster spot. He had a little burn to begin with this year. There's some other guys I can mention. Kendrick Nunn didn't even play at all this year. He was on the bench the entire year. He was dealing with his own personal injuries. Just all in all, just the expectation that the Lakers had this season. I think there was good reason to believe that the Lakers would be competitive in the West. I don't know as far to say like they would be like instant title contenders. I didn't necessarily have that perspective, even on paper, even though on paper that they looked pretty decent. I definitely had my doubts. And once this team hit the floor, the amount of inconsistency I saw from this team, it was just staggering. And really, it kind of set home when I actually saw the Lakers play against the Dallas Mavericks about a week and a half ago, where it just doesn't seem like there's any chemistry with this team. And I think by and large, it's just that you have so many different players that are trying to make a name for themselves in their own way. You know, Russell's a ball handler, LeBron James is a ball handler, Carmelo's still going to get decent shots up. He's trying to get as many points as he can. It didn't seem like this team was able to mesh at all this season. And to a certain extent, that was because of injuries. But all in all, it's just a failure. And LeBron James probably deserves the most criticism out of anybody on this roster. I know Russell has been getting a lot of criticism, and it's deserved because let's face it, you know, Russell has been inconsistent as far as his shooting goes the entire year. And I do think that some of the Russell criticism has gone over the top, but in certain instances, I think it's been well warranted. The one person, though, that has gone largely uncriticized was LeBron James. And that's where I'm really putting my major focus is that LeBron was really the one that constructed this roster. I don't want to hear anything about the general manager or the front office really putting this together. Like Rob Pelinka, I understand that he's the GM, but the one who's really wheeling and dealing to get players on the team is LeBron James. And let's face it, LeBron wanted Russell Westbrook over DeMar DeRozan, and look how that's panned out. DeMar's having a pretty solid year in Chicago. Even at one point, he was actually getting MVP considerations because he was on absolute fire during the middle part of the season. And Russell was so inconsistent. I mean, there were times where he was hitting the top of the backboard with his jump shots. I mean, you'd have to kind of go far back into the timeline where you actually see it like a DeMar DeRozan shot actually hit the top of the backboard where it's just an utter brick. And, you know, when you look at this roster, they brought in a lot of the old guys that were on this roster when they won the NBA championship just a couple years ago with Dwight Howard, Rajon Rondo. Rondo got traded like within the first third of the season. And Dwight Howard, like I said earlier, had minimal impact with this team. LeBron was really the main focus for the guys that were on this roster, bringing them into the fold. And it was just an utter failure. Now, as far as what's going to happen this offseason, if I'm the Lakers front office, I genuinely start considering trying to trade LeBron James. Because at this point, you're looking at LeBron as maybe having 2 good years left. And then after that, he may start tailing off as far as his production goes. I think it is time for the Lakers to seriously start considering rebooting the whole thing. Because if they go with this roster, or in any way, shape, or form, a roster similar to what they had this year, is going to end in the same result. And honestly, they might even be worse. Now, if they get rid of Russell, I think that's probably something that they're going to try to do immediately when the offseason hits, because they need to get rid of Russell. And Russell, as far as I'm concerned, he's probably reaching the end of his career as far as a starter goes. because I just don't see how he's going to be that impactful of a player as a starter moving forward. I think his days as a starter are coming to an end. When you look at the rest of this roster, I think you have to start considering looking at AD getting moved as well. Kevin, I'm being honest here. I think you have to really start considering moving major pieces to get something back in return to start a rebuild, because there's no other way to say it. The Lakers are facing a situation where a rebuild is on the horizon, and maybe they just jump started early and get to it now. I'm really considering that as far as what the Lakers are going into this offseason, because this is not sustainable. Granted, I know there were injuries this year, but if I can't rely on LeBron to stay healthy, if I can't rely on Anthony Davis to stay healthy, that essentially kills any sort of chance for them to be viable going into next season. And this year, it really kind of showed that these guys just can't stay healthy, not for an entire season. So I think when it's all said and done, this season is just an outright failure from a Lakers perspective. LeBron James definitely deserves the most criticism out of anybody on this team, even more so than Rob Pelinka. And I think it's time for the Lakers to just completely reboot and start a rebuild, because I think they're just faced with that reality. And that's just how I see it.
I mean, it's really hard to follow up a Laker fan, kind of give his insight and his opinion. I mean, someone as big of a Laker fan as you, who's been watching them since we were kids, I mean, you're going to know the culture better than anybody. You know, you, my brother, and a couple of other my friends that are, genuine full on Laker fans through the Kobe era, the ups, the downs, before LeBron got there, everything. So, really hard to kind of follow up. I will say on the opposite spectrum, to an extent, I will give LeBron a little bit of shit because I feel that LeBron James did have his hands in the offseason acquisitions to where they kind of leaned into getting Russell over DeMar, as Kyle had mentioned. Magic Johnson recently went on First Take and said that he had heard from multiple sources that they were genuinely looking at acquiring DeMar because he said that he wanted to come home. But Russell then became available, and they had turned their heads because Russell and LeBron were talking. So again, LeBron James had a very big portion to play in the acquisition of Russell Westbrook, which, in my opinion, ruined the entire chemistry along with injuries for this team this year. But I have to put it on Jeannie Buss and Rob Pelinka, because at the end of the day, you are the GM and the owner. You make the final say. Whether or not LeBron James has an influence, whether or not he is the megastar of the NBA, whether or not he is the franchise player currently on the roster, you have the right to say, no, I'm not doing that. That doesn't make sense. Why would I do that? You have to be able to evaluate players. You have to evaluate what you would be willing to give up to acquire said players. And you went and you gave up a couple of pieces that maybe weren't scoring at a high enough clip, or maybe weren't contributing at a Russell Westbrook potential level, but they were giving you different pieces and different attributes as a team. So, I mean, in the trade, I believe, what was it, Montrezl Harrell, KCP, and Kyle Kuzma for Russell Westbrook with a couple of picks included. The Lakers gave up a future. The Lakers gave up young stars. I mean, if you still wanted to trade Kuzma because he was inconsistent, at least you could have gotten something back for him. Instead, you lose 3 players, you lose draft picks, and you don't make the playoffs this year. Neither did Washington. So who really won that trade? I don't really know. The point of the matter is, as a GM, you got to be able to put your foot down and say, this just doesn't seem right. And obviously, DeMar DeRozan would have cost nothing because they wouldn't have had to give anything up. If anything, they would have had to restructure some contracts. Maybe they would have let some players go because they wouldn't have been able to keep them on the roster. But DeMar DeRozan over Russell Westbrook is an easy choice to me when you already have a ball dominant player in LeBron James. You have Rajon Rondo coming back. Why do you need to have another ball carrier? Why do you need to add somebody to your roster that can't shoot? Why do you need to add somebody to your roster that is his own on the court and on and off the court diva? Why do you have to add somebody that adds some kind of intensity that may or may not make your team better? I don't know. So the Lakers season is an utter failure. It's an absolute embarrassment. I mean, the Purple and Gold is a legendary organization and franchise between all of sports. I mean, we all know the greats that have passed through that, and to see a roster assimilated to be great and to not even make the play-in tournament when that wasn't even a thing back in the day, to not even basically make a top 10 seed, kind of embarrassing. So I don't necessarily know what's going to happen this offseason. Obviously, Kyle and I don't. It's just pure speculation. I would assume that the Lakers look to move at least Anthony Davis or LeBron or both, just because you've given up your future for multiple players. It's time to start acquiring some picks back. The majority of your roster is over the age of 30, outside of a few players in particular. So I would assume you let those players go, you build up some capital, and you see what you can acquire just because of the name that is Los Angeles Pretty sure a lot of players in the league would love to just play for the Lakers because of the name itself. I know a lot of rebuild situations aren't exactly enticing, but when you talk about the Lakers and then you acquire some draft picks, it could be a landing spot for some free agents. Anything major like a KD, a Steph, obviously not. Probably not. But yeah, I think the Lakers, I agree, Kyle. They need to go into rebuild mode. They need to accept that things like this, situations like this, are not acceptable, not in this culture. And it's unfortunate because I actually heard a point, and I want to get your thoughts on this too, since we're kind of just talking about it and we haven't had an episode in a while. If you want to split the screen back, dude, there was a segment that I sent you today on TikTok, and it's a group of gentlemen that talk about sports, mainly basketball. They said that LeBron's tenure in LA in totality has been a wash.
Yep.
Three out of the 4 seasons he's
I,
been there
I was thinking
have
about
not
this
made
today.
the have
I was
not
thinking
well
about
no
this
last
today.
year 2 out of the 4 they
2 out of the 4.
didn't make it, but yeah, they won a championship, but can you make that the one
Mhm.
reason to hold it up when it was in the bubble?
Yeah, this was actually something that I was considering. Um, I never actually got a chance to watch the TikTok that you sent, but it's kind of interesting that you brought that up just because that was something that I was thinking about just like in passing today. Because I'll tell it to you like this. So when I was working yesterday, I was driving Amazon van, had the radio on, and they were pretty much going in on LeBron. Basically, it's like, you're basically regarded as the best basketball player in the NBA. And you can't even get to, let alone a 500 record, but you can't even get into the playoffs. And the way that they kind of broke it down, granted, this is a radio station where they don't really focus on basketball to begin with, but they were basically saying it's like you couldn't even crack into the top 10 seeds in the Western Conference. Not the top 8, just the top 10. It's like you couldn't even crack into that. I mean, they're playing Golden State right now, or whenever you guys see this. And their record is like 31-48 or like 31-49. That's unacceptable. I know LeBron was dealing with a couple injuries this season, but still, this is LeBron James what we're talking about here. If you are so basically held up to the standard of one of the greatest players in NBA history, you have to make some sort of effort to go out there and try to get this team to the playoffs. Now, I imagine that he did. He tried to make some sort of effort, but clearly it wasn't enough. Kevin, I vividly remember back in 2013 when Kobe was dealing with a boatload of injuries. He single-handedly dragged that team to the playoffs and tore his Achilles in the process to get that team to the playoffs. The level of grit, determination to be able to go out there and essentially carry the team on your back and literally rip an Achilles tendon to get that team just to the 8th seed in the playoffs. It goes to show the level of hustle and the level of commitment that Kobe had to not only his team, but to the Lakers organization and the fans as a whole. And that is why Kobe will always be regarded as probably the greatest Laker of all time. Not because of the individual accolades that he had as far as like 5 rings goes, or winning an MVP, or getting all these all-star selections. It's not that. It's the fact that no matter what, he was able to go balls to the wall damn near every game that he was in, or I should actually rephrase that, every game that he played in, and he gave it everything that he had, despite the fact that he was dealing with injuries. LeBron doesn't. LeBron, if he thinks that it's not worth it, he'll take games off. He'll take a step back. I've seen that multiple times where LeBron, let's just face it, he kind of just meanders and goes through the motions. And in this year, when the Lakers clearly weren't, going to make the playoffs, there was a chance that LeBron could have been like, you know what? Even though that we're not doing well, let's see if we can make it happen. Let's see if we could try to get this team just into the play-in tournament situation. And then you never know where it could go from there. And granted, I know he rolled his ankle a couple days ago. Could have got out there and played, but he didn't. If that Kobe, Kobe would have gone out there. Even if he was at 80, 85%, he would have at least gone out there and given it his all. Just because that was Kobe. Kobe would just go out there and try to give the best performance that he could for his team. And in LeBron's case, that just didn't happen. LeBron just decided, it's like, you know what, it's not worth it anymore. And that's really kind of been LeBron sporadically throughout his career. Not, I wouldn't say the totality of his career. I can't say that's been a consistent marker his entire career, but that's been something that I've noticed multiple times throughout his career. When he just doesn't think when he doesn't think that it's worth it, he'll meander, he'll take plays off. And when you look at this season in particular, yeah, this year was rough for the Lakers this year. There's no doubt about that. And it really kind of goes to show just how insane in the level of competition the West is. I mean, the 4 years that LeBron has been there, granted they have won one title. It's like you said, they've only made it to the playoffs twice out of those 4 years. And this year in particular was awful. Kind of very similar to his first year with the Lakers. It didn't pan out. And granted, I don't know what's going to happen this offseason. There could be a chance that he gets moved. There's a very good chance. I think AD is probably going to get moved first before LeBron. I think LeBron they'll probably stick with. But all in all, the way that I see it with LeBron's tenure in LA, it was good for 1 year. But outside of the one championship year, it's been, what's the best way that I could describe this? It's been mediocre.
Subpar?
I'd say mediocre. Basically kind of a synonym in that way. But yeah, it's been mediocre. And I mean, as far as I'm concerned, kind of throw it out there, I don't think that LeBron should be regarded in this GOAT conversation anymore. I think that needs to end. Because granted, I know I'm kind of basing this off of one season, but I don't think that you could be held in regard as the greatest player of all time having something like this happen. There's no way. Even Kobe, like in those years, like in like 2005, 2006, 2007, like he single-handedly dragged those teams to the playoffs.
In a very competitive Western Conference in the early 2000s.
And this is unacceptable. Like LeBron should be able to get this team to the playoffs. I understand that he's older. I understand that he's getting towards the end of his career. But if you're regarded as the best player in the league, I don't know how you can get by this unscathed. Missing the playoffs entirely and getting eliminated with about a week to go in the regular season. That's just baffling to me. I don't know what you think, but that's just how I see it.
So, I mean, again, I can't necessarily give him full critique because the man is averaging 37 and 8. I mean, statistically, he's doing his job to the best of his abilities with the limited capacity roster and injury-ridden team he's had. Again, I do agree to the fact that that level of intensity, that mentality just isn't there. That dog anger, that drive, that I'm going to do this whether or not I break my foot or not. I have not seen that. But when you actually compare his player usage and all of these other statistics that matter nowadays, because we all know that analytics are important, LeBron James is doing everything he can possibly do aside from score 40 a game. He's taking a lot of shots. He's shooting efficiently from the field. He's actually making teammates around him better when they actually hit shots because, like you said, they're all well past their prime. So they're not hitting everything because we've all seen him hit people to get open, and people aren't making shots, quite frankly. So I will put some blame because he's not giving that extra oomph. He's not playing through, what we've seen, what we deem to be a simple injury because we've all seen Kobe play busted shoulders, broken fingers, torn Achilles. He hits free throws, you know what I'm saying? But again, LeBron and Kobe are two different players. LeBron, Kobe, and Michael are three different players. But I would agree just because of the failure, the consistencies of lack of success, at least this season and a couple of seasons since he's been in LA have not gone the way that they wanted. And I am a firm believer in he shouldn't have been in that GOAT discussion to begin with. But again, that's another conversation for here, for neither here nor there. But at the end of the day, man, the Lakers it's sad to see them go out the way that they did. It kind of sucks that Frank Vogel's got to take this on the chin and potentially lose his job more than likely. But I mean, what are you supposed to do with a roster that's consistently in and out of the emergency room and the training room? What are you supposed to do when your two best players miss a combined more than half of the season? And then a trade that the front office kind of pushes for that doesn't end up panning out. I mean, I feel like your hands are tied, your feet are tied, your mouth is covered with duct tape, and they threw you in the ocean with an anchor. So, like I said, I feel for Frank Vogel, but overall, the Lakers are a disaster. And, you can really put everybody to blame here, honestly.
Well, I know we're kind of dragging this out a little bit, but I mean, like, when you look at the Lakers as a whole, like this organization is like set up for like literal catastrophe. Like
Yeah.
there's no other way that I could say that, because you've moved all of your young pieces to try to go and win now with LeBron James and Anthony Davis. Now, granted, you did get the one. You got the one chip back in the bubble.
2020.
But outside of that, I mean, what else do you have really to show for it? Because when you look at the talent that the Lakers got rid of to bring in LeBron and AD, some of these guys that were former Lakers have been playing phenomenal. I mean, Jordan Clarkson is basically like a continuous six man of the player candidate. You look at Lonzo Ball. Lonzo Ball has progressively gotten better each and every year since he's left the Lakers, and is a somewhat viable piece for the Chicago Bulls. You look at Brandon Ingram. Brandon Ingram's been very consistent for the Pelicans. Granted, the Pelicans haven't what I would consider like overwhelming success, but him as an individual player, he has definitely improved since his tenure with the Lakers. Now, I understand like Kyle Kuzma was kind of an interesting piece just because early on he definitely had some potential. That's why he kind of stayed around for as long as he did, but you moved on from him. And he's had some decent moments with the Wizards this past season. It's just, when you get rid of all these young pieces and you try to go into a win now situation, you're only going to have a 4 to 5 year window. And then after that, you're going to have to completely rebuild this thing from scratch. It's just that, oh my God, who do you have on this roster once LeBron and AD are gone, though? Like, who's on this roster?
I think Kendrick Nunn is the only multi-year person that you had signed on
I
because
think he only
everybody
signed a
else
two.
got 1 year.
He signed a 2 year deal, I think.
I said multi. I didn't say
Yeah,
multiple.
I know, but it's like that. That's kind of the level of urgency that the Lakers are faced with right now. It's like after LeBron and AD, I mean, all these guys are on 1 year deals, like you mentioned. It's just
Is
I,
THT on a multi? Isn't he? I think
he
he's on a
might, yeah,
2 year deal too.
he might be on. I think he's on a multi-year one. I don't remember the
Yeah, the
years.
younger, I think the actual people under 30
And,
have it
and,
a minimum of 2
and do you
years.
know how
I
many points
think.
that? Do you know how many points that THT averaged this year? Do you know by chance how many points he averaged?
No.
9, 9 points per game, and got limited burn at best in multiple stretches. Like, you know, I mean, I remember last season. I know it didn't work out last year with KCP and Montrezl Harrell and Kuzma, but it's like
Those are better viable options than what you had this year, in my opinion.
I don't know how, like, this is just a terrible situation that the Lakers are faced with. I mean, the way that I see it, if the Lakers were to trade both LeBron and AD next year and start a complete rebuild, they probably win 25 games, which honestly is not that far from what they have now. They have 31, and that's with LeBron and AD, Carmelo
Yeah,
Anthony, and Russell Westbrook. They're they
they're a
are.
lottery team for sure.
I mean, hell, you could realistically talk about this team if they were to move on from LeBron and AD and just start a complete rebuild. You're talking about a 15 to 20 win team here. If
I would agree, but it doesn't matter because all those picks are going to what, New Orleans and then Washington.
Yeah, so it's like you're set up with disaster. I think they move
Even
AD.
if you do tank, you don't get the pick.
You got to trade AD. I think at this point it's a foregone conclusion. I don't know if they'll get rid of LeBron. As much as I've said that they should. You know how wild it would be to see LeBron James actually get traded. To actually see the headline that he gets traded. Be kind of
I
wild.
think he holds too much weight to actually have that happen. As much as it would make sense because they would relieve some cap and actually have opportunities to sign other people and acquire picks back because you know you're getting capital for him. Um, I just his name holds too much. Like that's just not happening. Like LeBron James will not get traded.
I don't even
If
know what.
anything, if anything, he'll opt out and become a free agent before that happens, or just a sign and trade. He'll sign an extension and get traded,
It's just kind of
in which he
wonder
still wins.
kind of just wonder though, like what would like a LeBron James trade package right now? What do you
That's a
think would
topic of
actually?
conversation for legitimately another week because that is absolutely insane. Like teams would literally have to give up their franchise. Mind you, he's almost 40 and people would still be willing to give up everything.
Yeah, I mean, like imagine like a trade scenario where LeBron got traded in his prime. I mean,
Can't, can't.
you're talking about like half the roster and like
Well, that
multiple pick.
and their entire future. More than
Yeah,
likely. I mean, for God's sakes, Paul George got what, 4 or 5 first round picks?
hmm
LeBron James in his prime is easily coming almost near 10.
I'd
And
say
I don't
probably.
care how dramatic that sounds. If Paul George, ladies and gentlemen, were to get damn near 5, we're talking LeBron James in his 20s, you're crazy.
I'd
Like
say
it's that fourth fact.
I'd say probably like 6 or 7, maybe even 8 picks.
Like I
Probably.
said, damn near 10.
I mean, OKC could probably make it work with all those picks that they have stockpiled. They could probably make that work.
Yeah, Sam Presti got enough damn picks to put my kids through the league.
I
I
know
don't even have
exactly.
kids.
I know. I mean, for God's sakes, I mean, he's going to have a generation of picks when it comes down to it. Gonna have
100%. Any NBA superstar that has a child from like now to 2025, he's like, you're going to be an Oklahoma City Thunder, young man.
yes, sir. It's like we got a farm system ready to go. We got 10 years down the road. We're all set.
Lying. But
But
we definitely have dragged on this one for just a bit, guys. We do
yeah,
apologize, but it was a lot to talk about. And,
that
Kyle and I haven't recorded in a while.
well, and this one, I think we needed to talk about this one in depth because when the Lakers get eliminated from the playoffs a week before the playoffs start, and LeBron James is on the roster, dude, like you can't have that. Like
Yeah.
I know LeBron's reaching the end of his career. I don't know how he's gotten largely unscathed from this though, because I remember vividly the amount of criticism that Kobe received from the sports media talking about he's jacking up all these shots. Oh, he's being so inefficient, like it's having a negative impact on the team. Yet they were still able to make the playoffs. Yet LeBron's having a phenomenal year, and they missed the playoffs entirely. Yet there's no criticism whatsoever. So it's like you missed the playoffs, but it's like, dude, you got LeBron James, and it's like there's no criticism with that. That's is he not above reproach? Is he above reproach in this? Like, just like, which way is it going to be? I Does he deserve some criticism or no criticism? As far as I'm concerned, he definitely deserves a lot of criticism. Because he was the one that wanted Russell over DeMar. And that decision's make a 30 for 30 off of that decision alone. So, but yeah, like Kevin said, I know we've been kind of dragging on this one. So we'll move on to our next topic in the NBA, and that is the MVP race. The MVP race has been really heating up the last month or so. It's pretty much coming down to a couple names like Nikola Jokic, Joel Embiid, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Luka Doncic. John Morant was in that MVP race at one point, but he's been dealing with a bunch of injuries the last couple of weeks or so. So his name is kind of out of the running for the MVP race at this current moment in time. So, Kevin, to kick this one to you, with the regular season coming to an end in the NBA, who do you have as the favorite to win the MVP when it's all said and done?
Objectively, Nikola Jokic. Biasly, Luka Doncic. I'll explain both briefly just because I know that we've spent quite a bit of time in the NBA already. Overall, Nikola Jokic has led the Denver Nuggets to a fifth seed. Nikola Jokic has done this alone because his counterpart has missed the entire season with recovering from a torn ACL in Jamal Murray. They went out and they signed Aaron Gordon to a long term deal. They dealt with a couple of rotations at the guard position, and of course, in and out at the forward. So Denver's had its fair share of drama and nonsense, but they still find themselves in the center of the pack in terms of the NBA Western Conference. Nikola Jokic is a walking triple double. Nikola Jokic is a walking conundrum because you can't figure it out. I mean, for God's sakes, I think he just moved into seventh all time in Denver Nuggets 3 points, like made total. That's a center. That's a guy that was drafted in the second round. That's a man that is 7 feet tall, that is, I think, leading the league in rebounding, if not is second or third. Like he's a top 3 rebounding candidate. And you're telling me he's also in the top 10 franchise for most made threes? I'm just letting you know, like, he's not your everyday center if you didn't already know. I mean, we're looking at Jokic's stats this year: 27, 13, and 8. Like, what? What are we talking? Like, what? My man, he's almost averaging 2 steals a game, and he's 7 feet. He's averaging 58% from the field, almost 34% from the 3 point line. He just won the MVP last year. He has no counterpart all stars. It's just him on the team. And you're going to tell me that he's not an MVP? You're going to tell me that somebody at his height, his size, in this day and age is not the best player in the league right now? You're telling me if you take Nikola Jokic out, this Denver Nuggets team, as assimilated, is not a lottery team? That's what distincts the difference for me. That's what pulls him away from Joel Embiid. I don't care about the player efficiency rating in this case because at the end of the day, you have James Harden on that roster for the better portion of the last 3 weeks or so. Mr. Shaq and Kobe comparisons. You also have Tyrese Maxey, who's coming out and playing very well over the last couple of weeks. You also have Tobias Harris, who, when given the right opportunity, I will continue to die on this hill and I will die alone. When given the right opportunity and used correctly, he can give you 15 to 20 points on any given night. But again, when you're not getting looks throughout the entire game, when they ask you to shoot after like 15 minutes of not putting up a single shot, of course you're going to shoot bad from the field. You're not in a rhythm. You're not in a consistency. You're not feeling confident whatsoever. But again, neither here nor there. You're talking about a roster that said they were going to win the Eastern Conference. You're talking about a team that has 2 top 15 players in the NBA. Talking about a team that has 2 top 10 players in the NBA, depending on who you ask. James Harden's a walking triple-double. James Harden goes 3-0 in his first 3 games as a Sixer, and the world blew up and thought that they were going to win the East. Hint, hint, they didn't, just like I said. Hint, hint, they've been losing pretty bad recently in terms of the last 3 to 4 games, not playing very well. Again, not like I called it, but I told you so. So Nikola Jokic, they're not winning very consistently either. But in terms of if you were to take that MVP candidate off of the team, the Nuggets have nothing. The Sixers still have plenty of stars. The Sixers still have plenty of consistent role players. The Sixers still have Doc Rivers as a head coach. Can y'all tell me the head coach of the Denver Nuggets with a straight face? What is it, Mike Malone? What has Mike Malone done other than go to the Western Conference in the bubble? And what was it, 2 years ago? The Nuggets haven't done anything. All I'm saying is Nikola Jokic at 7 feet is doing everything physically for this team. Joel Embiid, granted, he is doing a lot of things statistically as well. Not that I'm going to sit here and take it away. He is the scoring leader for the NBA at 30.4 points per game. Less rebounds, less assists, less steals, less of a field goal percentage. It's not hard. And he's playing with James Harden. I genuinely don't want to hear it. Nikola Jokic should walk away with this MVP. And I'm just going to throw this out there because I know I'm almost at time here. Luka Doncic has been basically averaging 30-plus points with 9 and 9. So we're talking legitimately a walking triple-double himself. The Mavericks have also won 50 games this year in the Western Conference. He is the only player in the MVP discussion that has an above 500 record against other MVP candidates and teams. He's also the only player that has led his team into an above 50 win ratio out of the MVP candidates. And again, I'm just throwing it out there. The man is legitimately doing absolutely no team outside of Spencer Dinwiddie, who just got to the team maybe 3 weeks ago also. So your second best player is a guy that's averaging 17 points per game. Just going to throw that out there. I know he's not going to win it, but food for thought.
Well, I mean, when I look at it, I mean, to me, it really kind of comes down to Nikola Jokic or Joel Embiid. And I will say that, Kevin, I think this kind of goes without saying. that both of these guys, as far as Embiid and Jokic are concerned, are having phenomenal seasons. Even though that, yeah, you picked Jokic over Embiid. I can't deny the fact that Embiid is having a phenomenal individual season. I think he's actually averaging his career high in points this season.
Yeah.
You might have to fact check me on that, but I think that's the case. But as far as I see it, I'm going with Jokic on this one. And to me, it's pretty clear cut and concise. So the one thing that I've always respected about Jokic's game is that he is essentially what I call a Swiss Army knife, because not only can he rebound the ball well as a center, he can play great defense, and he could shoot the lights out as a center, which is absolutely insane, despite the fact that he's 7 feet tall. And when you look at this year specifically with him, I mean, Kevin, it's like you said, he's averaging over 58% from the field this year. That's his career high. And with the game that they just finished up against the Grizzlies, he is the first player in NBA history to have 2,000 points, 1,000 rebounds, and 500 assists in one season. He's the first player in NBA history to ever do that, and he did it. He did that against the Grizzlies, which is just absolutely insane. And when you look at the impact that he's had with Denver this year, it's been unbelievable. Because it's like you said, if you were to take Jokic away from this team, they don't have Jamal Murray to kind of buffer that hit that Jokic would have if he's not on the roster. This team would probably be looking like a lottery team when it's all said and done. Granted, that argument can be kind of held across different teams just because if they're so reliant on one player, they're going to fall apart. But I can't necessarily say the same with Joel Embiid if he wasn't on the roster for the 76ers, because they still have a somewhat decent roster at the helm with the Sixers without Embiid, because they still have guys like Tobias Harris, James Harden, Tyrese Maxey, Danny Green. There's some other guys that they could use to their advantage to at least buffer the loss of Joel Embiid. So I give the edge to Jokic in that regard. And then when it comes to just other statistical parts to their games, Jokic is averaging more rebounds, like Kevin stated. And the one thing that's like a night and day difference to me is Jokic's ability to be able to assist. And Joel Embiid has definitely improved in that aspect of his game. He's definitely becoming a better facilitator than he did early on in his career. But Jokic is getting better as time goes on with the amount of assists that he's providing. Because basically, with the way that you see it with Jokic right now, is he's basically going to average around 8 assists per game. He averaged 8.3 last year. He's at 7.9. Let's kind of bump it up to 8 for him just for this season. So overall, I mean, to get 8 assists from your center is unbelievable. I mean, if this were 10, 15 years ago, they'd probably get like 3 or 4 assists a game. I mean, Jokic is basically doubling that. And it really kind of highlights this transformation that the center position is really going through. And Jokic is really the one that's kind of carrying the torch and leading the pack. If you're a center now, you have to be able to shoot. 10, 15 years ago, you couldn't do that. I mean, 10, 15 years ago, you had guys like Dwight Howard who were single-handedly dominating the paint down low. He'd get 30 points just from points around the rim, where he could snag 15 rebounds a game, and that would be it. That's pretty much the utility that they had for centers back in the day. Now they've become a far more prevalent point of not only just the defensive side of the ball, but the offensive side of the ball, and specifically with the facilitator aspect. Be able to assist the way that he does, which is essentially putting up point guard level assists per game, that's unheard of. And it really kind of highlights really what Jokic has been able to do to bring the center position to new levels. So, I mean, Kevin, for God's sakes, when you look at just like the last 5 games in particular with Jokic, the last 5 games, he scored over 35 points in every single one of them. I mean, in the game against the Grizzlies on Thursday night, 35, 16, and 6. The night before that, against the Spurs, 41, 17, and 4. Against the Lakers, 38, 18, and 6. Against the T-Wolves, 38, 19, and 8. I mean, these are staggering stat lines. These are it's just the level of consistency. It's so amazing. And I have no reason to believe that it's going to stop anytime soon. Now, I don't know if it's going to translate into success for Denver when the playoffs come around. But with Jokic on that roster, it definitely makes them more of a formidable opponent. And when it's all said and done, I think that Jokic is going to get the MVP, and I think he's going to repeat just because he has shown me the consistency that he had last year, and in some elements, he's improved upon it. And to be able to basically cap this year off as a 58% from the field shooter, which is his career high, after coming off of an MVP season where he averaged 56. I really don't know what else to say. This guy is a phenomenal basketball player, and he's going to continue to be that for the foreseeable future. That's just how I see it.
Hey man, it's a tight race. We have a lot of candidates that have jumped, thrown their name into the hat over the last month or so. Jason Tatum carried the Celtics back to relevancy. Obviously, Luka Doncic, Devin Booker, Chris Paul was in the conversation for a while, but was injured. As you said, John Morant. I mean, at one point we were literally talking about 7 people, including DeMar
Even
DeRozan, maybe
DeMar DeRozan, yeah.
8. We're talking about viable. You can make
And,
cases for each of them. Obviously, some bigger than others. But
and
dude, this was
Giannis,
a very, very big margin of candidates for the MVP this year.
yeah, and even Giannis had stretches like where you had to throw his name into the hat for the MVP race. You know what's kind of crazy though, and I think you probably picked up on this with Luka, is when you look at these like major MVP candidates, all these guys are international players. Like when it comes to like the cream of the crop, as far as like MVP contenders, like this year specifically, it's predominantly international players.
International players.
Because I mean, you could look at guys like John Morant and DeMar DeRozan, like those are American players.
And
But
Jason too, and Devin.
yeah, but I never really considered Jason in the MVP discussion until probably like literally probably like the last 2 or 3 weeks or so.
Yeah.
Because I mean, let's be honest, like, Boston was kind of struggling in the beginning part of the year, and Jason wasn't necessarily playing that well. He did step it up, and he's been playing phenomenal ever since. But you look at like John Morant, for example. John Morant was phenomenal this season. It's just that he was dealing with injuries the last month or so, and it kind of curtailed his MVP chances. But when we've really looked at it, I mean, Giannis is international. Embiid is international. Jokic is international. Luka is international. Really kind of goes to show, like, I think the wave that we're seeing as far as like the preeminent forces that are coming to be with this next generation of players, it's going to be international talent that I think is going to carry the wave in the NBA for the foreseeable future. And maybe that might just be like the next generation where it's just, this generation, it's going to be predominantly international players that really kind of carry the torch. So,
Yeah, no, it's interesting now that you mention it. I guess I didn't really pay attention to it at some point. I don't know why, because top 4 or 5 candidates legit aren't even from America, so
mhm.
it's absolutely insane. But yeah, no, I mean basketball is advancing. It's actually getting kind of crazy the way that things are going with how they're focalized over there overseas and then they're brought over. I mean, whether or not they have an impact collegiately in a semi-professional league or like Luca, for God's sakes, he just played for Real, has been monitored by NBA scouts 15, whatever it is that he was actually getting scouted. But dude, international talent is getting better and better, and it's actually really cool to see.
I remember I was watching it was an Instagram reel, and it was Luca in an interview, and he was talking about the differences between like FIBA regulated basketball and NBA regulated basketball. And the one thing that he kept mentioning was that he was saying, like, from a tactical perspective, when it comes to European basketball, it's superior than the NBA. He's saying that like in the NBA, it's far easier to score in just a regular NBA game than it is to score over in a European game. And that's why I think he stated in that interview that I was watching on Instagram, he was saying that like when it comes to the level of play in the NBA, he's saying that the players in the NBA are better than over in Europe. But from a tactical perspective, European basketball is superior than the NBA. I
Yeah.
think I think he was essentially saying like scoring 30 points in the NBA is easier than what it is over in Europe. And that really kind of highlights the difference as far as like this next generation of players coming from international spaces coming over to the NBA and absolutely taking over. It's because I think by and large they think it's easier over here. than it is over there, just from a tactical perspective. So it doesn't surprise me that these guys are popping off. And we even saw that like in this Olympics, this past Olympics, where, I mean, let's face it, the United States struggled at first dealing with the FIBA rules. Like it was not the same. And I mean, you had plenty of you had plenty of diatribes about going after that U.S. Basketball team at first because they were not playing up to
They
snuff
were
early on.
soft.
Yeah, and that's the thing, that they got too used to the NBA rules. They weren't getting the foul calls that they were typically accustomed to getting, like they would in the NBA. Didn't happen in the playoffs, and not in the playoffs, in
Not
the
at all.
Olympics. In the Olympics, excuse me. But yeah, it's really kind of this. It's kind of like I said. It's just this like this international wave is really taking a hold at the NBA, and I think it's only going to continue unless the NBA does something to kind of make the game a little bit more tactical in nature. But I don't really see that. It's just too many. It's too soft with the foul calls. That's just kind of how I see it.
Yeah, no, that's definitely not going to happen. But um, I do know that we have a couple more segments to go, and
Yeah,
we've kind of just drowned out the NBA for a little bit. We do have another NFL topic, or excuse me, an NFL topic and something within the MLB. So I know for a fact, what is it? We got DK
we
Metcalf coming up, right?
yeah we got two. So the first one's going to be essentially like the biggest like free agency winner.
Correct.
So
Right.
you know, basically at this point, you guys really free agency in the NFL has tapered off significantly, just from a couple of weeks ago where it was just absolutely red hot. But from this perspective now, we can kind of look back and see like which teams really made the biggest improvements via free agency, which teams took a step back via free agency. But we're going to mostly focus on just really the biggest winner from free agency up until this point. And that's the question that I have for Kev. So, Kevin, to kick this one to you, now with free agency tapering off in the NFL, who do you think has been the biggest winner so far?
Dude, you might as well keep a split screen because this is going to be quick. For the St. Louis, wow, the St. Louis. The LA Rams are by far the winners of NFL free agency. Bobby Wagner stays in the division. Allen Robinson. I mean, for God's sakes, they're doing an extension with Aaron Donald, who said that he was thinking about retiring. So they end up keeping their best piece on the defensive side of the ball. I, can you really say anything? Their receiving depth was already absolutely insane. They already had an incredible defense, and now you go and add a leader who has a chip on his shoulder to prove Seattle wrong. I mean, it's not even close. I know that the Chargers went out and they made some key acquisitions to the pass rush, to their corner depth. I mean, they re-signed a couple of key players on the offensive side as well. So I mean, they're my next best runner up in terms of like free agency winners. But dude, defending Super Bowl champs, Kyle and I both said that we had no faith in them to repeat. You go and sign a potential receiver that can go out there and give you 80 to 90 catches a year with well over 1,000 yards and is a big target for the end zone. And then you go and you add somebody like a Bobby Wagner, who is a leader of a defense, somebody that's vocal, makes tackles and big plays. It's really, really hard not to say that LA has not jumped into the category of they might do this repeat thing, but obviously, the season has to progress. And names are great on paper. It's how they're going to execute in the season. But I got the LA Rams winning free agency without a doubt.
Kevin, it's really hard for me to find another team that has really bolstered their roster to the length that the Rams have had. And that's why I'm siding with the Rams on this one. And to me, it's not even particularly close. And basically, it's for all the reasons that you just outlined. I guess really the reason why that they're doing this, as far as just bringing in the level of talent, as far as like Allen Robinson goes, bringing in Bobby Wagner, like these are guys that are going to shore up not just one side of the football. They're shoring up both sides of the football, and they're doing it in a tremendous way. And I think it's by and large based on the fact that they're going all in with Matt Stafford. I think they realize that they have a window of opportunity here. And the way that these things typically work out is that you have about a 4 to 5 year window to really maximize the amount of success that you're trying to attain. Well, the first year that they brought Matt Stafford into the fold, they win a Super Bowl against the Bengals. And then they go up, not only go into the offseason with the expectation of not only are we going to be a relevant team moving forward, but with some of these moves that they made, they said, we're running it back. Like that's our goal here, and we're gonna be in that driver's seat to make that happen. And Kevin, when you just look at this roster from top to bottom, I mean, I don't know how you're gonna be able to stop this offense. Like this offense that the Rams have at their current disposal right now. I mean, even if they were somehow to magically bring back OBJ, they don't even really need OBJ at this point, just because that offense with Cooper Kupp, Van Jefferson, Allen Robinson, Cam Akers out of the backfield, and then you got Tyler Higbee coming back at the fold. I mean, this is going to be a nightmare scenario for any defense to go up against. And then when you look at the defense, I mean, you have 3 all pros in every level of the defense. You have Aaron Donald, who is arguably the greatest defensive player of this generation on that front 4. You have Bobby Wagner, who's been one of the most consistent linebackers, arguably one of the best linebackers of this generation so far within like the last decade or so. I know, Kevin, you have your own quarrels with Darius Leonard, but that's neither here nor there. And then you have Jalen Ramsey in the secondary, who's one of the better corners in the NFL. I mean, this is a phenomenal roster from top to bottom. And the way that I see it is with these moves, I think they're in the driver's seat to go back to back. I really see that. Not only do I think that they could potentially go back to back, I think we have to start considering the fact that if they play their cards right, are we looking at a dynasty? Just because I think they're going to maximize these next 3 to 4 years to try to get not only 1 Super Bowl, but 2 and possibly 3. And with what they have on the roster and what they have guaranteed moving forward, I can't rule out that possibility. Do I think that they're going to go out and do it just because like they've signed all these guys? No, they have to go out there and earn it. But I'm telling you, they got the pieces to do it if they play their cards right. Hopefully, these guys are just the only thing that can only set them back is injuries, or they're just not playing up to standard. But with the roster that they have right now, this team could realistically pull off a dynasty. That's just how I see it.
Hey man, we've thrown the word dynasty out there a lot recently. I'm not going to go out there and say that far just because when the Chiefs did what they did, obviously they went to 3 Super Bowls or 2 Super Bowls and they were able to get one. Obviously, this team is a little bit on the older side. Some of them being in their later 20s, some of them in their 30s. Obviously, Matt Stafford being one of the older ones on the team.
Mm-hmm.
I don't necessarily know if that's going to be possible. So I will say that they're definitely in the forefront seat to repeat for sure, just because of the talent they've acquired. Got to make sure that they stay healthy. Got to make sure that that coaching staff stays intact. Have to make sure that obviously the weapons are going to stay surrounded. So outside of course, Cooper Kupp and Allen Robinson, Van Jefferson is a great number 3, maybe a number 4 on another team because he doesn't get as many targets as he should. But that third receiver, getting rid of Robert Woods, Odell Beckham obviously being out for the foreseeable future until maybe mid to late November, maybe early December, depending on the recovery process. There's going to be some holes to fill. Tyler Higbee missed some time with some injuries as well. We all know that the secondary past Jalen Ramsey and the additional corners out there are questionable at best. But again, they do have plenty of talent to run it back. I think that LA has kind of screwed themselves on the books because they have given a lot of money to a lot of players. And in terms of keeping people happy to re-sign them, what's going to happen when Jalen's contract's due? What's going to happen when obviously you got to re-sign Cam Akers? What's going to happen when Cooper Kupp's contract is up in 2 years? It's again, it's things you have to think about. It's a lot of things that are going to have to be worked out. But again, right now, like you said, I agree completely. They're throwing the book and they're saying, "Fuck it, we're going to do it all right now and win as much as we can."
They've mortgaged their medium to long term future, and they're basically kind of just playing for the moment right now, and
Yeah, they have a
that's
window,
kind of
like you said, 3 to 4 years.
and they're gonna do everything that they can to make the best out of it. I think at the most it's like 5 years. Like it'll be a 5 year window. That's kind of me like pushing it. I think
Yeah,
realistically it's like 3 or 4. But what they could do in that 3 to 4 year window, I think it's gonna be special. But
sure.
we'll keep it within the NFC West. We're gonna focus on one of the up and coming studs at the wide receiver position, and that is one DK Metcalf. Now, DK Metcalf is a Seattle Seahawk at this current moment in time. But there have been some rumors circulating around his status going into next year, and it revolves around the idea of him possibly getting traded. Now, there hasn't been really anything official as far as like Seattle is preparing to move him, mostly just been rumors that have been circulating around his availability. But it is interesting nonetheless to talk about DK Metcalf just because he's a freak of a wide receiver. Probably one of the, I mean, just from an athletic perspective, one of the most athletic wide receivers that the game has to offer at this current moment in time. Now, Kevin, to kick this one to you, with the rumors circulating around DK Metcalf and him possibly getting traded from the Seahawks, do you actually see him getting traded in the foreseeable future?
Personally, I'm going to say yes. And I know that we talked about this right before we started recording. I kind of jumped the gun on the Russell trade. I called it was going to happen. I just called it a year too early. Um, you don't have anything to play for over there. You're playing with Drew Lock. You're playing with Geno Smith if he gets re-signed. I mean, there's not necessarily any faith in the quarterback room. Your running back room is riddled with injuries. Your defense is absolutely a shred of what it used to be. The coaching staff is just not what it once was. I mean, surprisingly enough, you got rid of your franchise player and kept the oldest coach in the NFL for a rebuild, which just doesn't make sense. You just got a massive haul for your franchise, so why not just capitalize and go get a couple of picks for DK and just legitimately start from complete scratch? It makes the most sense. There are plenty of teams that are willing to pay for his services. One in particular, the biggest team that I've been hearing about mainly is the New York Jets and him going over there. I don't necessarily know how he's going to feel about the big lights and, of course, playing out there in New York with a second-year quarterback and Zach Taylor. But I feel like to me, it just seems like a better situation than playing with Drew. Drew's had opportunities to prove himself. Zach Wilson still's got a lot to learn. I feel like you would provide him a definitive number one, and by you, obviously, I'm talking about DK specifically. You would give a lot of the receivers in that locker room someone to look up to and someone to really say, let's lead. Like he said on I think he was talking about a podcast with Kevin Garnett. I forgot what podcast it is, or the Kevin Garnett show. But he said that for the first 2 years, he was able to be kind of spoiled with Bobby Wagner leading the way on the defense and Russell being the leader on the offense. He really looks like he wants to kind of step up and be that person of interest, that person that can lead a team, be that voice in the locker room. And I do believe him because he did sound very, very sincere. So if he can be that leader for this team, and by this team I mean the Jets, I think that they are poised to make not a run in the AFC East, but I think that the addition of DK Metcalf to New York would be pretty significant because it would give Zach Wilson that for sure number one, and it immediately makes that offense that much better.
Yeah, I'm not so sure about this one. Um, I'm gonna say more than likely that he's going to stay with the Seattle Seahawks going into next season, and I think it's just really based on the reason that I'm like, they get rid of DK. Who is Drew Lock going to be able to throw to outside of Tyler Lockett? That's kind of like how I see it. So, I mean, when I look at DK Metcalf, he's a phenomenal athlete. I think it was just not this past offseason, but last offseason, he was running in Olympic trial track races and actually did fairly well on his own. And that's really just what you have at your disposal. You just have a freak of an athlete who's, I think if memory serves me right, he's like 6'3, 6'4, probably weighs like around like 240, 250 pounds. And it's just an amazing wide receiver who,
Absolutely unnecessary with his physical stature and skill
yeah,
set.
I've never really seen a wide receiver like this built. Like we've seen receivers that are tall, like 6'4", like Randy Moss, maybe even somebody like Julio Jones. Julio Jones, I think, has like a bigger like stature than Randy Moss did in his career. But just the way that DK is built, I've never seen a wide receiver built like this, like huge. Like this dude is just a monster
A
of an
walking
athlete.
tank.
Yeah, there's no other way to say it. And I think if you're Seattle, I think you have to kind of factor that in going into your offensive capabilities next year. Because if you get rid of DK Metcalf, I mean, who are you going to bring in that's going to be a viable piece to go alongside Drew Lock and Tyler Lockett? Unless they're going to make the switch when it comes to offensive philosophy and trying to run the football next year, which I don't really necessarily seeing that be the case. Because first of all, let's just face it, their running backs can't really stay healthy, no matter who they put in their running game. Their offensive line has been in shambles the last couple of years, just because when Russell Wilson was there before he got traded, he was one of the most sacked quarterbacks on a consistent basis the last 3 to 4 years. And I don't think it's going to change anytime soon when it comes to what the offense is going to struggle with Seattle. So I think the way that I look at it is that they need to start focusing on their offensive line. They have to start bolstering that aspect of the roster because that's probably been the biggest weakness on the offensive side of the ball that I can see within the last couple of years or so. I think getting rid of a DK would be a mistake just because I mean, he's a great target to throw to. I mean, when you have two targets like Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf to throw to, Drew Lock is going to need those two guys to be able to produce because I think if you get rid of one and DK Metcalf, I think Drew Lock is going to struggle mightily. And Kevin, there's a very good chance that we could see Geno get some burn if Drew Lock is not playing up to snuff next year for the Seattle Seahawks. Just overall, it really just kind of indicates where Seattle is at right now. The fact that all these rumors are circulating around DK. It's just a team that is facing a pretty difficult rebuild now that Russell Wilson is out of the fold. And I think this team, they are going to struggle mightily this season. But I do think that DK is going to be a part of this roster. But I think after this season, I think that the rumors of DK leaving Seattle will really start to garner significance. I just don't think it's this year. It'll be next year, just because I think they're going to try it just to see how it goes this season with DK on the roster with Drew Lock throwing him the ball. But I think once it ends in a tire fire this season for the Seahawks, that's when I think that the DK rumors of him leaving will really start to gain a lot of traction. That's just how I see it.
Dude, in my opinion, man, if you're gonna do a rebuild, you just kick the tires, bro. Just let it be, break it down, get the assets that you can while they're at the top. If DK gets hurt, his trade value goes down. You're gonna have to pay him a contract extension over the next year or two. Um, you don't want to really lock down a lot of money without a solidified quarterback. You know for a fact that you acquired a quarterback that is inconsistent at best. Why keep a star receiver on this roster if you can trade him away, trade him out of the conference, get him away, get him paid, make him happy? DK's not a problem child. DK's never been in the media. He's never really complained, thrown fits on the field. Give the kid what he wants. If I'm DK Metcalf, I'm looking at this and I'm saying, bro, I just went from an all-pro, Hall of Fame quarterback to Drew Lock.
Yeah.
Again, like I said, you're going to have to pay him if you keep him. Get something for him while he's in his prime. Get something for him while he's young, whether that's a couple of picks, offensive linemen, whatever it is you got to do. You traded your best player. Why the fuck would you not trade everybody else after that? To me, it doesn't make sense to keep assets when you got rid of your best one.
Yeah. It's kind of like we both stated. It's Seattle's in a full rebuild, and I think it's going to be a particularly tough one because I don't see in that division that NFC West is so stacked. They are pretty much, as far as I'm concerned, they're a lock for last place.
Seattle might fuck
You
around and
saw,
go
you
for the
saw what I
number one
did there.
pick.
You saw what I did there, huh?
Yeah. I saw what you
Yeah.
did. You're not slick. For sure, no doubt in my mind, they're competing for the lottery, like for a fact.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, there's a very good chance that they could. I think that there's a very good chance that they could be a top 5 pick next year
Yeah, wouldn't be
after next
surprised.
season. So that's just what it is with Seattle. You get rid of your essentially what could be a Hall of Fame quarterback, and you side with a 70-year-old coach and Pete Carroll. It's down bad, bro. You're down bad.
Pretty
What do I
much.
know? Yeah, I have a microphone. They get paid millions of dollars to make those decisions. I don't.
True.
But with that said, we're going to transition to our last topic of discussion, and we're going to focus on a little bit of baseball here. So the MLB has started once again, a couple weeks late due to the extended lockout between the owners and the players, but we are off and running with the MLB this year, and I think it kind of goes without saying that we have to kind of pick a favorite going into this year who's going to win the World Series. Last year the Braves won the World Series, but it's a new year, and there's definitely a lot of room for a lot of excitement to come with this upcoming season. I'm not going to focus on the Yankees here, unless Kevin wants to bring them up on his own accord, but we're going to focus on who we think is going to win the World Series when it's all said and done. So, Kevin, to kick this one to you, with the MLB season underway, who do you have as the favorite to win the World Series this year?
So I mean, for the NL, to me, it's pretty clear. In my opinion, the Dodgers are the favorites to go out there and win the NL. Their best competition, more than likely, is going to come from either within the division with the Giants. Maybe the Padres wake back up. There are a couple of teams like dark horses that could potentially go out there and shock the world. We all know that the Braves ended up winning it all last year. So I mean, again, there are some viable teams, but with the roster that LA has assimilated, it's it's like we talked about 2 weeks ago. It's the goddamn Avengers. So I really don't predict anybody else coming out of the NL. And I know it's premature, but again, it just started. The season legit started today. Then you go into the AL, and I mean, three of the best teams in the conference are legitimately in the same goddamn division. That is the Boston Red Sox, the Tampa Bay Rays, and then you have the Toronto Blue Jays. The Yankees are the fourth best team in that division, and the Yankees can go out there and take a wild card spot too and surprise a lot of people. But I'm not going to go out there on a limb and say anything stupid like that because that would be blasphemy. Obviously, you have a couple of teams that can still compete. You have Minnesota got better; they got rid of some bad contracts and they acquired some young pieces. Gio Urshela, Alex Correa, and a couple of other pieces. Obviously, you have the Houston Astros that still have a pretty solid team and are getting Justin Verlander back this year after having surgery and missing some time. I mean, you name it, the AL has just got plenty, plenty, plenty of talent. And I wouldn't be surprised if the Angels play better now that Mike Trout is there. Otani's coming off an MVP season. They just acquired Noah Syndergaard. So, I mean, the rotation of their pitching staff got a little bit better as well. Overall, I'm probably going to go with the Boston Red Sox coming out of the AL just because I feel like that roster is completely rebuilt. They're healthy. Alex Cora is back under the helm for a full another season. And the bullpen has gotten just a little bit better with some of the acquisitions that they made this offseason. Chris Sale is healthy. So they get their ace for the full length of the season. Hopefully he can stay healthy. But again, man, I hate saying it. I hate giving them any credit. The Red Sox are just fully loaded this year. They're healthy, and I feel like they are poised to make a run. Now, that's not to say that the Blue Jays aren't ready to go with Vlad Guerrero Jr. leading the way, and that the Rays aren't ready with that multitude of underpaid roster players. I mean, I can't even name some of the players on that roster because none of their names really stick out because they're just a bunch of no names, but they just play very well together. But overall, man, baseball's back. I'm happy. I'm excited, and I mean, I just can't wait to see how this season pans out.
So if you had to pick one team that you think is going to win it all, who do you think? Like I know you picked the Dodgers as like the favorite in the NL and the Red Sox as the favorite in the AL, but if you had to pick between one or the other, who do you think would be the one?
I think the Dodgers can do it. I really do. They have multiple All Pros. They have multiple Gold Glovers on the infield and outfield. They have multiple former MVPs. I mean, they've got that lineup. They got Cy Young winners. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous what they have on that roster and the fact that they can afford them all. So I'm going with the Dodgers.
Yeah, and honestly, that's kind of how I see it here. Not to really kind of piggyback off of what you said, but I, it's really one of those situations where I really can't pick anybody else other than the Dodgers just because they've made a tremendous upgrade with their roster based on a roster that was already good to begin with last year. So, when I look at this roster, I mean, just to name off some of the names, I mean, Kevin, this roster is absolutely loaded. You got Freddie Freeman, Cody Bellinger, Mookie Betts, Trey Turner, Justin Turner, Chris Taylor, and Will Smith. Like, this is an insane roster to work with. And it's no reason why. Like, this team was phenomenal last year. But when you add somebody like Freddie Freeman, who just came off of a World Series winning year with the Braves last year, tells me that the Dodgers are saying, you know what? It's like we're like this close to getting a World Series, and they're basically going out there and they're gonna do everything that they can to make that possibility a reality. And just this roster, I mean, it is stacked from top to bottom. The pitching staff is very good. You got Clayton Kershaw who's coming back into the fold. Just overall, I mean, the NL is kind of an interesting league simply just because really the NL West is kind of a particular focus of mine because you have the Dodgers who are probably the favorite out of that division right now, but I can't sleep on the Giants. Giants were going toe to toe with the Dodgers the entire year last year, and I imagine they'll definitely have something to say about this year. And who knows that they could potentially rival the Dodgers once again this season. And then, like you said, I think the Padres could definitely make some noise here and there. They've definitely been getting some shine. It's just they fell apart in the second half of the year last year. Hopefully for them, that doesn't continue going into this year because I definitely think that the Dodgers have not the Dodgers, the Padres have a pretty solid roster to work with. They have a lot of youth on their side, and hopefully they can take advantage of that. In the AL, Kevin, I'm beating a dead horse here. I mean, that AL East, like you mentioned, it is absolutely stacked. I mean, when you're looking at the Yankees as like the fourth best team in the division, I mean, that's how good this division is. I mean, the Blue Jays, the Rays, and the Red Sox, I think all of these teams could have a say of winning the AL East when it's all said and done. It's just which team is going to make the most of the season. I'm not really going to put money on who I think is going to win the AL East, but it's really a toss up to me to who I think who's actually going to win it because the Rays were just a phenomenal team last year. They had over 100 wins, but two more playoff teams came right behind them with the Blue Jays and the Red Sox. So all in all, I mean, this is a fantastic division to look over. But I think when you really kind of look at just this year in particular, who's going to win the World Series when it's all said and done, I think the Dodgers are going to do it. I think they're a little bit sore based on how last year ended and with what they did during this offseason. I think they're taking full advantage of the roster that they have at their disposal. And I think they go for broke and they get it this year. That's just how I see it.
Hey, man, when you have a roster like that, coaching staff like that, players that are ready to go, I mean, just what? You got Mookie, former MVP, Freddie, former MVP, Kershaw, former Cy Young winner. I mean, they have the accolades, they have the personnel. Eh, It's not fair. Genuinely, they look like the Yankees from 2009, where they're just buying some of the best players in the league, and I can't get mad because we did it. So it's really cool to see. They called us the evil empire for years because we bought our players, but nobody seems to be mad that the Dodgers are doing it. That just goes to show the national hatred the Yankees have accumulated over the last, I don't know, 100 years or so because we're just that good. But whatever. Um, and then you go out here and you look at what the Dodgers are doing out there. They've already won World Series over the last, I think, 2 or 3 seasons. I can't remember. I think they won the COVID year, right? Yeah, they did win the COVID year because they had the whole Justin Turner situation where he tested positive and was still
Yeah.
playing.
Yeah.
So, um, yeah, so that was absolutely incredible. That run that they made, redemption, and we all know what happened with the Braves last year. So, only time is going to tell. Baseball season is here. Obviously, the longest sport year, or should I say, the longest sport in all of sports with
As far as
162
games are
games.
as far as games are concerned, yeah.
Hey, man, but me and you are hyped because we don't have the guy at second for extra innings. We are finally back to regular baseball this year. Thank God.
Well, there needs to be a couple more adjustments, but that's a good one to
That's a big
start
one.
with.
It's a
That's a
big
big
one.
one. I'm glad that's back. I mean, look, I had major issues with that because it kind of goes against the integrity of the game as far as I'm concerned. I mean, I played baseball for damn near 15 years, basically from like when I was 3 years old to basically when I was 18 years old, and I'd never heard a concept of, oh, if we get to the eighth inning, yeah, we're gonna put somebody on second to kind of get this game over with quicker. We never did anything like that. That was stupid. They tried it, it didn't work. I'm glad they're kind of going back to their old ways instead of sticking with something that clearly just did not sit right with the fan.
Yeah,
So,
for sure.
all in all, I'm happy about it. So, but
Damn right.
yeah, the MLB season is underway and to be in it for the long haul, bro. So, as as Kevin likes to say, once again, the Yankee season starts once again, and season that's going to lead to another heartbreak.
Yeah, I'll try to get to some games in the Trop. We'll try to link up. I'll try to go up to Tampa this year. I gotta get. I haven't seen the Yankees live in a little bit,
There's
so
a there's a Rays game that I'm going to. I think in June. There's a couple guys. We actually have a pretty like solid group of like 10 or 15 people. There.
Yankees
I don't know
Yankee
if it,
game or just a Rays game.
I know it's a Rays game in particular. I forget who they're playing
Hmm.
against. I know it's in June. Um, but there's like a contingent of us of like 15, possibly like 20 people going to that game sometime in June. So it's actually kind of a big squad that's kind of rolling deep for that one.
Yeah, that sounds pretty lit. I mean, like I said, I definitely got to get up for a Yankee game because I haven't been to the Trop since I moved to Florida. And that's 8 years in August, which is absolutely embarrassing.
Uh,
So that's on me.
well,
I've been to
well,
more Marlins games than Tampa games.
well. First of all, good on you because that's a smart business decision. Because first of all, Marlins Park is a much better baseball stadium than Trop. And the one
A
thing that I
hundred
will,
percent.
the
But the
what,
Yankees are here half the year.
the one thing that I will say about the Trop though, you're gonna find this so weird. Bring glasses when you go to the Trop. The lights in that stadium are so fucking bright. It's almost distracting. Like when you're actually sitting, like the lights in that stadium are just so unbelievably bright. It actually kind of distracts from the game. And I can't believe I've never said that about any other stadium before, like where I have to say like the lights are a factor. But it's just those lights are so bright in the Trop. It actually is it's kind of annoying. And the thing is like, you know, I know like the usual thing about the Trops, like nobody goes to those games just because it's in St. Pete and nobody wants to make that drive. But just overall, that stadium is just garbage.
Hey, listen, I don't see a problem because I see them tickets are dirt cheap.
Yep.
I'll get me a fucking hotel, or I'll crash on your goddamn couch, and I'll go to a game on a Saturday and then go to a game on a Sunday and drive back because we
Yep.
usually have three or four games. I don't care. I got to see the boys. If that means I got to go home again for the summertime to see a game with my boy Santino, shout out to Santino. I'm gonna do that. I got to see the Yankees this year. Whether or not we're gonna suck, it's long overdue. I miss being at the baseball stadium. It's weird. We say this growing up, and a lot of people don't understand it until they go. There is no better sporting event to go to and to have a cold beer and a hot dog than a actual baseball game. Like it's one of the most relaxing places in the world.
Yeah. Well, and the thing that's different about baseball compared to like any other sport is that you could like genuinely like relax because like, there's no time clock. You know, it's based on getting 3 outs. Now, depending on how you see that, you could see that as like, oh my god, this game is taking forever. I just want to go home. But it's
Those are
like,
people that never played it and don't appreciate it, though.
well, here's what I'll say, because I actually played it and I watch it too. You know, playing it is one thing. I love playing baseball because it's a little bit. It's definitely more of a mental game than it is a physical game. There's no doubt about that. Now, watching it, it could be tough. It could be tough sometimes, but even for me, I still enjoy watching baseball games whenever I actually go to the game. Watching on TV, it doesn't really hold up that well to me because just the intensity. It's just the feeling that you get of actually going to a baseball game compared to watching it on TV. You just don't really kind of feel the pressure that's associated with watching the game on TV compared to actually watching it. You can actually kind of feel like a little, I don't want to say like low end tension, but it's like each like individual pitch matters.
Yeah.
And it's just the feeling is different being at a game, physically at a game. You know, I definitely, well, I'll say this, watching a game like physically at the stadium, I'm definitely more like inclined to actually pay attention because watching it on TV, it can get pretty stale to me. But being there, it's great. I love it.
Well, I will let you know if I find some cheap tickets and if you have some time off because I know you'll be working on weekends. We'll make it happen.
100%, bro. 100%. Kev, I think we got all of our topics knocked out, bro. Ready to wrap this up?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Well, with that said, you guys, I know it's been a while. You know, we kind of took a little bit of a break from putting out an episode on Monday, but we just got busy. Just, you know, busy with adult things. Kevin had work, I had work, just
And
kind of
your boy had to
happens.
recover from a national championship loss. So, it took a couple of days, but I'm all right.
Yeah, but you know what? It's kind of unexpected to begin with. The
100%.
whole championship run. So I mean, good on UNC for literally getting like this close to claiming a national championship. But good on Kansas. Good on Kansas for being able to mount a pretty extensive comeback. I think at one point they
Biggest in
were.
NCAA final history.
I wonder. I didn't see a lot of those Falcon memes. Uh, really like paid
I
attention
saw
to.
a couple. I saw a
They saw
couple
a
from
couple.
some Duke fans that I have on Twitter.
Yeah. No surprise from Duke fans, no surprise. But you sent Coach K to retirement, so I imagine there's like a little bit of a silver lining with that.
They'll be fine. Like I said, I told Kyle when the Duke game finished and it just went final, I was just happy that we won. I was happy we were in the predicament we were in. Uh, right off the rip, I told Kyle straight up, I did not expect for us to win the Kansas game when we went up at halftime. I was over the moon, but at the same time, I looked at Isabel and I took out the trash and I said, Kansas is going to come out and punch us in the mouth. Like word for word, that's exactly what I said. And I said, if we are not ready, we are going to get run off the floor. And once the turnover happened from the inbound of the second half, I knew right off rip this team wasn't ready. They did not have the demeanor. They didn't have that killer instinct. I know I'm not going over a full review of this game just because with the end of the episode, and not to mention it's a little late on our side as well. Bottom line, shout out to those boys. Nobody expected it. I didn't expect it. I'm happy we got there. It put the program back on the map. It got Hubert Davis massive amounts of recognition, and he won National Coach of the Year. So once again, shout out to the Tar Heels. It's always going to be that Tar Heel blood for me, but it did sting a little bit for sure.
Yeah, but all in all, I would claim it as a successful season for
100%,
UNC.
100%.
So no shame in that. So, but with that said, that'll pretty much wrap it up from here. If you guys like what we do on a typical basis, definitely like our YouTube page. Definitely give us a listen on audio platforms like Apple Podcasts, Spotify. We definitely appreciate the support wherever we can get it. We will be back next week with a new episode on Monday, so definitely stay tuned for that. Kevin, I'll let you have the floor to carry us on out.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, as always, thank you for everything. We genuinely appreciate it. I will be off this Sunday, unfortunately. I will be in the Florida Keys this weekend, and I won't be getting back till probably early Monday morning. So it's going to be Kyle solo dolo. I do apologize in advance for my
It's fine.
partner being by himself.
No worries. I
But
got it from here.
I'll be back more than likely for a Wednesday segment, if not Tuesday, and then we will record Thursday. But again, as always, guys, thank you so much, and we'll see y'all soon.
Yep. We'll see you guys later.